Hey friends, thanks so much for joining us. The material coming from the Common Sense Show and Dave Hodges is really maybe at the very top of the heap in terms of covering breaking news and information. Dave, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today.
Well, I'm glad to be here, guys, and I'm looking forward to jumping into some of these very important topics.
The last time we spoke, we did an interview called "The Banks Are Gearing Up for the Collapse." It was seen 170,000 times, and I think we need to revisit that a little bit. And then I'm going to turn it over to Rory. He can ask you anything he wants. I know he's got some important questions, but there's a piece that came out from Zero Hedge just the other day. Europe considers wholesale savings, confiscation, enforced redistribution. I just want to read this to you guys real quick. At first, we thought Reuters had been punked in its article titled "EU Executives See Personal Savings Used to Plug Long-Term Financing Gap," which disclosed the latest leaked proposal by the European Commission. But after several hours without a retraction, we realized that the story is true. They want to come after everybody's savings to plug these debt holes, which cannot be plugged. So when we talk about the banks are gearing up for a collapse, we're even talking about the central banks. The Reuters article goes on to say, and I quote, "The savings of the European Union's 500 million citizens could be used to fund long-term investments to boost the economy and help plug the gap left by banks since the financial crisis," end quote. This is the recipe for confiscation, isn't it, Dave?
For slavery.
Yeah.
See, if I earn my money, and my money goes to retirement, to the bank, and I have a little bit in my wallet, and the government can come and take the two of the three biggest sources of my income, that's slavery. Last May, I think this is the place to start, Treasury Secretary Jack Lew came out and said that we're going to take some federal retirement accounts for protective purposes, take the money for safekeeping, and eventually, we'll just give it back. And I reported on that, excuse me, as a early warning sign of troubles to come. And I don't recall if that was part of our last conversation, 5 months ago, but I suspect it was. And at the same time, I discovered that Putin's regime had done the same thing with $7 billion of Russian retirement funds. And so to me, it's kind of like you're watching the movie Jaws, you hear the initial music, and you know the shark is coming. That's how I viewed those two events. I didn't view them in isolation. I believe it was a tag team event, and it showed me truly that Obama and Putin are working for the same organization, which is the Banksters. Move forward into last year, we got more confirmation that when you put your money in the bank, it belongs to the bank, not to you, and that MF Global will never be punished in terms of what John Corzine did, because that follows that principle of 90% of possession is, or 90% of the law is your own possession of that money. So that's where this all starts. But to me, I think Obama has signaled his complicity to the quote that you just read from Reuters when he talked in the State of the Union address about the MyRA accounts. And the principle has been set. With the stroke of a pen, we've seen almost 18% of the economy under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, transitioning into control by the government, control of small business functioning. Actually, it's going to be the obliteration of small business at the end of the day. Control of who your doctor is, control of all prices related to healthcare. So we're seeing that principle being set, and I believe that MyRA, coming on the heels of the Affordable Care Act, will follow the same pattern. Leopards don't change their spots. And what we're going to see is there's going to be a crisis, a false flag of types, and then there's going to be the rollout of mandatory MyRA, and the governments who are broke are going to take more and more of our money. Effectively, we are going to become slave labor, where everything we earn is subject to confiscation from the government. Now, the false flag attack, we can debate what that is. I think it's really important to know that in that false flag attack, I've always called for a currency collapse. But now, in order to take a real watchful look of the stock market. The stock market, I saw a chart the other day, guys, that compared the stock market now to 1928, 1929, and there's not a lot of difference. Right. And if there's a stock market crash and the government starts grabbing funds, That explains the 2.2 billion rounds of DHS acquired ammunition to go with their 2,700 armored personnel carriers to the Russians that are training in the streets of America, training in specialized camps, the Chinese that are rumored now to be here, and I'm still working on trying to verify that. But trust me, I can prove 9 times Sunday there are a significant number of Russian troops in this country, and that's why they're here. And this is also why some of these fired generals, and I'll speak to 3 sources on this, 2 are still unnamed, and I think 1 will not be unnamed for long. But I've talked to 2 of the fired generals, and what they have told me, and I'm going to write an article to this effect entitled "We Are the New Viet Cong," that some of these generals are actually talking about and probably actually initiating a guerrilla resistance that will end up being a civil war in this scenario that we're talking about. And Dr. Jim Garrow, ex-CIA, is parroting these 2 gentlemen who he does not even know. I asked him if he knew them. He says he did not know them. And he's telling exactly the same story. So I do think we're going to see bloodshed in the streets. I think we're going to see DHS and the Russians and what other blue helmets are in this country against the American military, the veterans, in a guerrilla warfare, along with whatever civilians will join them. And I think it's going to be literal hell on earth. And let me step aside and say this for a second.
Well, let me ask you one thing before, because I'll forget, if I may.
Okay, sure.
I heard an interview just the other day with Dr. Steve Pieczenik in which he said, and I'm quoting loosely here, the structure is in place for a military coup in this country. What's your take on that? I think anybody that loves our republic would wish that we could retain our republic. Maybe we've already lost it. I think the signs are there that we have lost our republic. It's no longer a republic by, for, and of the people. It's by, for, and of the corporations and the military-industrial complex. How would a coup help save this thing? And what's your forecast on that? Do you think that a military coup is in the cards?
Yes, but we've already had an attempted coup. And I wrote about it when this happened, when Ambassador Stevens was murdered with the tacit complicity with the Obama administration. The Benghazi situation, which I wrote about, I detailed the fact that I believe this looked like it was a coup, and I've since had it confirmed by my insider military sources that it was. It's something that I have not yet put to Jim Garrow, which I will, but I stand by my statements. And Glenn Beck actually picked up on this, as did Michael Savage, about 6 to 8 months after I published my article in 2012. I detailed how General Ham, at the time he was the head of AFRICOM, was launching a rescue mission with commando troops. And Admiral Guyette, who was the commander of Carrier Task Force 3 in the area, he was providing surveillance, he was providing air cover and intelligence. Both men were arrested by their number 2. I don't know about the number 2 behind Guyette, but I was able to find out about the number 2 behind Ham. His name was Colonel Rodriguez. He was a member of the CIA. He stepped in and stopped this attempt. Now, the overall plan did not end there. But I wanted, before I jump back into how this was a military coup, let me set the stage. And I want to talk about the significance of this. You've got the head of AFRICOM, and you've got the head of Carrier Task Force 3. You've got 2 of the top 4 military commanders in the region. And if you recall your history at that time, we were on the verge of taking on Syria and Iran. No pretenses. We were making noise. We were making provoking moves, trying to get the other side to punch us in the nose first so we could go in. So this was considered to be a war zone, and you had 2 of the top 4 military commanders conspiring to disobey a direct presidential directive to not intervene in Benghazi. Now, what I've been told is back here in the States, had Ambassador Stevens been rescued, and the plot was able to be revealed for all to see, the Watergate of all time, if you will, that would have been the toppling of the Obama administration, hence a bloodless military coup that would have been carried out through legal impeachment and probably imprisonment of this president. And this is not something, guys, that's under the carpet and I'm the only one that's ever heard of it. This is out there, and elements are out there widely. And the whole comprehensive story that I'm just relating right now is significantly out there with some people who've looked into this. So the subject of coup is already there. Jim Garrow said on my show, and I quote, he believes that a coup is in process. I think that's true. And the proof is in the silence. With 264, and that's my latest count, of senior command military officers fired by the Obama administration, isn't it interesting that not one of them is going on Fox? Not one of them is writing a book. Not one of them is trying to cash in on their fame and fortune as a general and trying to basically make political hay against this communist president. They're strangely quiet. And I think the reason they're strangely quiet is because they're joining a movement in which things are really beginning to happen.
Well, it's startling when we talk about a military coup because, of course, when I hear Steve Pieczenik say there's the possibility of a military coup, for whatever reason, because I'm predisposed to hope, I interpret that as being, it would be the good guys, the white knights, are going to take this thing back from a executive branch and an imposter-in-chief that is clearly, quantifiably out of control. That's my hope, but the reality is that it's hard to believe that any military coup is going to return the power of the republic to the people. That's my hope. It's nothing more than that. It's just hope.
I've had to hold my nose and write the same thing, and I literally mean hold my nose till I'm almost breaking it. Military coups don't end well. Generally speaking, when you have a revolution or a palace coup, you have a second one. And the second one installs just a different brand of tyranny that's a lot like the first one. Because there are always people waiting in the wings to bring their version of tyranny to the forefront so they can exploit the resources of their own country. And that's what my fear is with a military coup. History is on my side, excuse me, when I make that statement. So I think that when we look at military coup, part of me does root for it. And part of me roots for, we have the Ron Paul types in charge of the coup who will hand the government back over to civilian authority. And that's my greatest fear. I do believe a coup is coming, but I think before a coup can be initiated, Obama is going to initiate his own false flag, and then the games are going to begin. I think, Obama does know what's happening.
Yeah.
There's no question. He has to know.
Yeah. On the Ron Paul note, I still hold the man in the highest esteem, and anybody that wants to say he's controlled opposition, just turn off the interview now, because I do like Ron Paul.
So do I.
Had he been in the executive office now, you can see how hard the mainstream media fought to keep him out. They lied, they cheated, the elections were stolen. The GOP itself helped steal straw polls and election results from him. The news media would never report when he was first or second. They'd literally omit his name. Obviously, he is not the controlled opposition people make him out to be, because if he were, then they would not have fought so hard to keep him out of the White House. I'll
say something, though, unfortunately, and I want to say, you brought up two names here, the Paul name and Steve Pieczenik. I don't know Steve Pieczenik. I've never talked to him. I've never interviewed him. But I have found out he is or has been a member of the CIA.
Yeah, that's
right.
And
I think that and also the CFR. And when I hear those initials behind someone's name, I have to wonder about the agenda. I don't have anything to add to that comment, but I take what people from that background say with a grain of salt.
No, absolutely. Well, the same is true for Jim Garrow, correct? Isn't he CIA or former CIA?
Yeah, but Jim Garrow has had an attack of conscience. And see, Jim Garrow has now crossed the line to becoming a whistleblower. I don't know that Steve Pieczenik is coming out and revealing things that could get him in trouble.
Right. No, I concur with that assessment 100%. I have a very difficult time listening to the entire interviews with Steve Pieczenik, because generally he will flower the conversation with things that I know not to be true in terms of an international geopolitical kind of Zygmunt Brzezinski grand chessboard view. And so I absolutely take everything he says with a grain of salt. But the possibility of a military coup is definitely something we need to discuss, and your insight there is very valuable.
Well, I think that Pieczenik's view could be provocative, and I'm just speculating now, and I want to make that clear. I don't know that he really knows this or thinks this, but I suspect it. Some people think that Obama is actually trying to provoke this now before the opposition forces get too strong. He wants to draw us out in the street now so we can be crushed. And if he feels like if he waits a whole lot longer, the numbers don't necessarily favor his side. And that might underlie why Steve Pieczenik is saying what he's saying.
Okay. At this point in the interview, I would be remiss not to bring Rory into the conversation, because you know what? If it wasn't for Rory, we would have never done the first interview, David. He helped set that up. And now that you're kind of a friend of the show, I think we need to hear from Rory. Rory actually pointed out to me before the call your article, The Bilderberg Plan to Obliterate Humanity. I don't know, Rory, if you want to work that angle or if you want to continue on this, the possibility of a coup. What would you like to cover with David?
Well, I kind of want to look at an article that he published. The name of the article is "Look in the Mirror, America. This is what we have become."
Hmm.
And in that, one of the opening lines in that article, Dave, well, you actually go on to describe in great detail how we have become, quote, fat, dumb, and miserable. And I want to take that, I want to add something to that, and that is we've become lawless as well. But the lawlessness that starts at the top, and I mean with the president and the Congress and the Senate, the sheer criminality that we've gotten the trickle down that Reagan talked about 30 years ago, but it's come in the form, in my opinion, of lawlessness, and we see it at street level. With that said, I know that Agenda 21 is a big part of what you write about, and the fat, stupid, and miserable and lawless. How do you think that we have actually arrived at this point?
Well, I think it goes beyond the blueprint of Agenda 21 and goes to the handlers like Zbigniew Brzezinski, David Rockefeller. Out of order, or excuse me, out of chaos comes order. And I think this is what we're seeing. I think this is deliberate. We're looking at the bifurcation of society into several different parts. This administration tries to divide and conquer. Trayvon Martin case was a classic example of that.
Yes.
And so they want no unanimity among the people. Because see, ultimately, if we stripped away our religious differences, our racial differences, our socioeconomic differences, all of us are in the same boat. It's the majority of us versus the few of them, and them want to enslave us, and they're in the process of doing it. But if them can keep us fighting with ourselves, then we'll never know what happens until it's too late.
Okay. So, what is going to be the tipping point that wakes up enough people? What's it going to take, or what do you see as being a tipping point that where the American people go, "Wow, that that's wrong."
Well, I think we've reached it, to the extent that there now is a Tea Party. That Ron Paul had more support from the American military than all of the other Republican candidates combined. Haven't we reached the tipping point, David?
Well, according to sociologists in tipping point theory, we have. According to sociologists and research that is actually about 10 years old, that for a movement to take hold, 10% of the population must be absolutely committed and devoted to the cause. Well, we have more than 10% of the people who are awake, but the key words there are devoted to the cause. What we're looking at right now is we have a lot of people that are exposed to the truth on a daily basis, but they suffer from cognitive dissonance. This is such a departure from their worldview, their paradigm, that they can't handle it. And psychologists tell us that cognitive dissonance comes in when a shift is so big in someone's belief system that they just shut down and go into a shell. And this is what we see with a lot of people. Then the other factor that's going on now, too, is the fact that we know that when you put people in large groups as opposed to small, they're less likely to help someone in distress. The term for that is bystander apathy. And so because we have this vast nation of 315 million people, someone else is going to stand up to tyranny. Someone else will do the job. We'll write the articles. Someone else will get into the street. And that right now is keeping the 10% base plus that we have from really coalescing into a formidable political force. But I will tell you this, the IRS is taking steps under Obama's direction to stop the grassroots movements from happening. Have you guys heard about these new IRS proposed regulations that want to effectively outlaw pre-election activity from grassroots organizations like the Tea Parties, the Libertarians, the Constitutionalists? They want to outlaw primaries. They want to outlaw endorsing a candidate or raising money 60 days prior to an election. And I'm saying, what the heck? Hillary Clinton's already raised reportedly $1 billion. So, I mean, this is what we're seeing. So they're afraid of this, and that's why they're taking actions against third parties.
Huh.
Wow. The iron fist of banker tyranny, I mean, it just knows no bounds. it's just really extraordinary when you wake up to everything and how we've gotten here. And if you understand the Federal Reserve, and if you understand the IRS, and the IRS is the enforcement arm of the Federal Reserve, if you understand the big picture, oh my God, and Agenda 21 and the New World Order and the Bilderberg Group and their plan to obliterate humanity, it's just an endless list of tyranny, a tyrannical agenda that gets really hard to follow and keep up on. Dave, how do you keep up on this stuff as well as you do? I mean, you're really prolific in terms of the number of articles that you put out.
A lot of people ask me that, and I don't think of myself as being involved in a prolific activity. I mean, it is somewhat time-consuming. But, as I related for your listeners the last time I was on, I got into this 11 years ago when John McCain and the CAFTA forces were trying to steal my property and that 300 of my neighbors without any compensation. And I realized it was about the North American Union and the Canamex highway system. And then from there, I discovered all this other stuff that was going on. And that's how I got into local radio. I was on media. I made media appearances fighting against what was happening to my community. And I was offered a radio spot locally, and then RBN picked me up. I don't feel like it's prolific. The thing that I do here is I'll write on an article that interests me, that I think the public would have interest in, and that the public should know, and something that I think our kids need to have defeated so they can inherit a world worth living in. And then as I open that one door and step into it, and I write on a topic, my ancillary research says, well, there's 5 more things here to cover. So I'll just stick to my 1,600 words right here, but gee, there's 5 more subjects that I've got to pick and choose which one to cover. And my regret is that I'm only one person. I've actually started taking publications from outside people, and I wasn't going to do that because, I've realized these problems are a lot bigger than Dave Hodges' ability to cover them.
Before we let you go, Dave, it just popped into my head. I really want your opinion on this. We broke the story of Ryan Crane, the 37-year-old head of global program trading for J.P. Morgan. I think unexpectedly passing away. That's, judging by the comments made at the funeral home on their website, it was a surprising and very unexpected end to this man's life. We reported on that. Zero Hedge ran with it, and the story went viral. We've seen so many bankers dropping dead that I like to say now that being an international banker working for a criminal bank is now more dangerous than being a deep-sea oil rig diver, which I think previously had been considered the most dangerous job on the planet. What is your take on all of these unexpected banker deaths? Are we seeing wet work? Certainly we're seeing statistical anomalies if you look at an insurance actuary chart, that young, healthy bankers are dropping dead and falling off of buildings in the city of London. What's your take?
And committing suicide with nail guns.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It's wet work, is it not?
Yeah, well, what it is all you got to do is go watch the first episode of the trilogy The Godfather, and that's what's going on here. This is a criminal mafia organization that's trying to run the planet, and people that no longer fill the purpose or key witnesses who might speak out are disappearing. Now, I can't speak to what each one of these people could have added, what their threat was. At first, I thought, when I first heard about the first few bankers, I thought this was the canary in the mine, that the system was about to collapse, and these people were killing themselves like the 1929 stockbrokers did when they jumped out of the Wall Street buildings and plunged to their death. But now it's pretty clear this is an orchestrated effort to wipe these people out for a specific reason. And I suspect it has to do with evidence tampering, because that's typically what goes on in situations like this. But this isn't new. Jim Mars came on my show about 15 months ago, and he detailed how somewhere between about 450 and 500 bankers, top-level bankers, had left the United States. I read about 8 months later that bankers were doing a similar thing in China. And what I think we're seeing here, and this is all coalescing in various regards. The bankers don't want to be in the countries where there's going to be turmoil. So they're going to less invasive places of safety and solitude. The other bankers that we're seeing die now, I think, are bankers that if this thing rolls up badly and we see court actions, if the people win, who could testify against me, this is why I suspect that these bankers are being eliminated. Or maybe these bankers have a conscience and said, I'm not going to go along with it, but I don't think so. You don't get to be the VP of J.P. Morgan and go to Sunday school and really believe what you're being taught. So I think this is evidence tampering through murder.
Yeah, that's our feeling too. I mean, that's our gut reaction, and In the case of Ryan Crane, what a sad story. He leaves behind a wife and a young son, and if my memory's right, I think his son, I recall his son's name is Harry. And, how sad. But I'll tell you what, I would not want to be working in the headquarters at a high level for J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, or any of these other criminal institutions. I would not want to be that guy, and I think for anybody who is that guy, they need to seriously consider getting out of that occupation as soon as possible.
Well, what did they say though? There's no leaving the mafia.
Yeah, no. Once you're in, you're in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and once you hold those secrets, you're in trouble. I mean, there's only two ways out. You stay in and you keep quiet, or you end up dead.
That's how I see it too. But it makes you wonder this too. Just pause for a second, ask yourself this question: why are they killing the bankers if it's about evidence tampering to keep them from talking? Is there a counteraction that's coming? Are they worried about losing a civil war? Are they worried that someday there's going to be a Nuremberg trial for bankers? I actually wrote about that over a year ago, called the Nuremberg Trial for Banksters. And if I were the head of these criminal organizations, I would eliminate people that could put me in prison. So I really thought this through, and I don't really have anything new to add to the conversation, so I haven't written about it. But I really think that's probably what's going on here.
As you said that, what popped into my head is what we're seeing in Connecticut with gun registration. We're seeing a lot of people refuse to register, and now on paper, because of their own criminal government in that state, they're technically felons for not having registered their weapons. But by all accounts, I think probably triple the total number of firearms that were required to be registered in Connecticut. Only a third of that total number of firearms have been registered. So now the state has turned people in Connecticut into felons, but really they're just constitutionalists and they're patriots.
We're all felons.
And they're fighting against the tyranny by not registering.
We're all felons.
Right.
We are all felons. If we're not one of their minions, we are a felon. If we're not one of their bankster employees, carry out their acts of heinous enslavement of this country, we are terrorists. How many ways do we have to see it? You have the BIAC report, you have the Connecticut actions, you have criminalizing the trapping of rainwater. If you're a Bible-believing Christian, you're of concern to the DHS now in their police briefings. We are all terrorists. So this is what it's frustrating for me, that we can't seem to get the bulk of the American people to understand. George Bush said it right, but I'll paraphrase him. He said, remember that quote, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists?
Right.
Well,
it's a double
right
entendre.
now, you're either with the Constitution or you're with the enslavers. And that's really what this comes down to.
Yeah. After I had woken up and I revisited that quote from him, you're either with us or you're with the terrorists, I realized you were with the terrorists either way. That was the most ironic part.
Well, that's exactly right.
Dave Hodges, always one of our favorite contributors to post material from. I mean, certainly you've got a extremely successful website. I think your website gets more traffic than SGT Report. People can visit you at thecommonsenseshow.com. Can you also tell them how to tune into your radio program?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I'm on every Sunday evening on the Republic Broadcasting Network. We're on some terrestrial stations now, but the easiest way to listen from 9 p.m. to midnight every Sunday night is to go to my website at thecommonsenseshow.com and click on the listen button in the top right-hand corner.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time, your insight, and your diligent work on a daily basis. The articles you write, again, are absolutely jaw-droppers. Thanks so much for spending the time with us. We do appreciate it.
My pleasure, guys. I'll come on anytime. You guys are terrific.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank
You're
you.
terrific. All right, buddy. Thank you.